The year is 2022, and with Chinese New Year, it is now officially the Year of the Tiger. So what better character to discuss than Tora, as his name literally translates to tiger and... Wait, what? Is 2023? Okay, I got it. Yeah, this script was started early last year and was just never done. But it's always a good time to talk about everyone's favorite Nobon. Also, I can't do a joke with Tromark being an actual tiger now. It just doesn't fit the flow, and I had to make room for the new bit. It's unfortunate. Anyway, the tie-on script is taking too long, and Tora is such a beloved and totally non-controversial character to talk about today. Tora is by no means perfect, but I still think the puffball deserves a bit more credit, and has an interesting story to tell. For Xenoblade 2, the main defining part of any character is the driver-blade relationship, and because of that, Tora is someone who should have been nowhere close to the story. The driver needs some kind of aptitude to be able to awaken a blade from a core crystal, but Tora could never do so. Instead, Tora decides to continue the research from his dad and granddad, or Dadapon and Grandpapon, and attempts to create an artificial blade that bypasses that random aptitude requirement and would allow Tora to be a driver. I think this is a fantastic premise for a character in this world. A driver's ability to awaken the blade from a core crystal is basically just college applications. Sure, you have an idea of what kind of person the architect would allow to bond with a blade, but at the end of the day, it just seems completely arbitrary. Frickin' Dougal passed whatever aptitude test was necessary to get a blade. Tora, on the other hand, basically creates his own aptitude by working hard on this seemingly impossible project, all for the payoff of being a true driver. He creates his own opportunity as someone so young. It's all a very nice premise for a character. The only issue is...
How may I be of service, Master?
Tora doesn't quite stick the introduction. I get that he's a kid, and the game goes for a more lighthearted tone, but come on. The game still deals with suicide, trauma, loss, and existential dread. Tora doesn't have to go this hard in the comedy direction. They even double down by making Bobby Cutie have the maid outfit. It's not even funny. Zeke? Now Zeke is funny.
Handling a man is terrible.
Truly the peak of everything Monolith has done as a company. Tora's introduction is not peak, it is cringe. Objectively. Alright, you know what? Let's stick to the positives. And to do so, let's skip all the way to the end of the game. The development of Poppy Cutie Pie, can't believe I have to say those three characters in that order, is probably my favorite point in Tora's sort of character arc, even if it's optional in the grand scheme of the game. Tora basically decides to manually upgrade Poppy with this idea of having Poppy grow up. I think this is really cool because traditional blades just don't do that. They instead just watch their drivers' skin age, muscles atrophy, bones cripple, and soul die. Tora is running with the fact that he and Poppy are not a true driver-blade combo, but he can work with that and create his own advantages to being an artificial driver-blade combo. An advantage of making the blade go through the process of maturing and growing up with the driver. It is the main thing that makes extended relationships between blade and driver very weird to me, even non-romantic ones, since the blade never changes appearance from a teenage girl or an adult man, while the driver meanwhile will grow taller, lose hair, and spit blood. While I hope Tora doesn't eventually make Poppy feel the crippling effects of old age, he is allowing Poppy something closer to a human life. Can you argue Tora is pulling this trigger a bit too fast, given it's not like much time has passed since Poppy's creation? Sure, but there's only so much time in this game, and I will say, going on a world-saving adventure is sure to mature you by a good handful of years. There's one other aspect of Cutie Pie that I find really cool, and that is her design. Tora makes like an NFL coordinator and basically steals ideas from his successful peers. He takes design elements from Pyra and Mithra and implements them into Poppy's upgraded form. Mithra and Cutie Pie both have long hair that forks at the bottom. The weapon she uses is very similar to Pyra's Aegis sword. Tora and Poppy both look up to Rex and the Aegis sisters, so Tora uses that as inspiration and in a way pays tributes to someone he respects greatly. Going beyond those aspects, Xenoblade is also a series that tends to exemplify a character's traits not only in dialogue and cutscenes, but in combat as well. Using combat styles as a metaphor for a character's personality is a bit harder in this game, however, since a character can use 2 non-mandatory blades, giving them a much wider array of combat potential. However, we see that they still care about this design method in the DLC, where the driver and blade teams are locked in. Mithra is the kind of person who will punch first and ask questions never, so she and Adam are glass cannons. Hugo believes a true leader is someone on the front lines and taking hits for their team, so he and his squad are aggro-drawing tanks. This integration of combat and personality allows each character to feel coherent and unique. Tora begins the story as the tank of the team. He had to fulfill some role, with Nia being the healer and Rex being the attacker. You could argue that Tora wants to defend his idol because he already respects Rex's courage and passion. You could also argue Tora's the tank because someone had to do it, and it doesn't make sense for a Welsh cat to do it. Well, it doesn't make sense for someone half her height either. Tora doesn't have the focused, protection-driven character that, say, Rhine had in the past or Lance has in the future. However, then Poppy Swap gets introduced. Poppy Swap is what makes Tora Tora. Tora works within the limits of being an artificial driver-blade combo and introduces this ability to customize Poppy into whatever battle style the player sees fit. He creates a point of strength out of what could be seen as a disadvantage that Poppy doesn't have the direction that usual blades have. Tora has formed this so that he and Poppy can be outfitted to serve whatever needs the party has. They have limitless potential. Tora is still just a kid, and after devoting so much of his life to artificial blade research and finally achieving it, he probably hasn't spent much time thinking about what to do with his life afterwards. He still has that potential to do whatever he discovers and tune Poppy for that desire. He doesn't owe his life to defending a country. He doesn't have innate healing abilities that he hides away from. Tora's just a kid that, like many kids and young adults, doesn't properly know what he wants. So he leaves his options open. He ensures that he and Poppy can fit whatever path he pursues in the future. Ending Tora's arc with the creation of Cutie Pie would have been a nice ending for me. It finishes this story of how, despite not being gifted some random traits, this guy was so driven to achieve his and his father's dream, and upon completion of that dream, found ways to make that dream his own, and make it so that the distinction of artificial blade versus real blade doesn't matter. Each would have its pros and cons. Except that's not exactly how it ends. Instead, we reach the Phantasm sequences. I love these kinds of sequences in media, being able to delve into a character's head and have the ability to show their true feelings and thoughts. Overall, I think Xenoblade 2 pulls them off fairly well, except for Tora and Zeke, but that's for another time. Tora talks about how he and Poppy want to be a real blade and driver, which I think is just terrible. Yes, this is Tora's overall dream, and it's a dream of something he can never truly obtain. But I felt that he had acknowledged this, and instead made do with the hand he was given. He made Poppy grow up and have customizable battle capabilities because they were artificial driver and blade, and he could take those liberties. He could push the boundaries of blades because they were artificial. He could find positives in his negative situation. It felt that he had accepted that being a real driver didn't matter. That being an artificial driver is still unique and something to be proud of. I don't have much to say on Poppy's desire to be a real blade. I don't know why Tora would program that into her. That sense of feeling that you aren't real. Maybe not something you should give a robot. Now, to be fair, Cutie Pie's creation is optional, and I think without it, this Phantasm scene makes a lot more sense. At that point, Poppy QT had been around since like Chapter 4, and Tora's potential as an artificial driver would seem very limited, even with Poppy Swap. Poppy QT's creation was also just her unlocking another stage in her ether reserves. It was something in the initial design, but that means it was something shared by Tora and his predecessors. It would feel that Tora wasn't progressing, and he didn't have an idea like Cutie Pie that was solely his and his alone. so his frustration would be more justified. If only he was a real driver, then he could bond with all sorts of blades and grow as a driver and a person. There's not really a clean way to resolve Cutie Pie's optionality and reframe the phantasm though. The later stages of the game do have a sort of story-driven timer feeling, so it'll be difficult to make Cutie Pie a requirement. Genbu is sinking and you need to get the feather. Pyra Mithra were taken and you need to find the third sword. Torna is ascending the world tree and you need to beat them there. All these late game situations are meant to be played with intense urgency. It's not go find Cole or go talk to the Praetor anymore. Being forced into optionality is the price for this part of Tora's story pertaining to just him and Poppy, and not integrated into the story as a whole. I guess what I'm trying to get at here is that Tora is fine. There are good aspects to this plucky inventor building a blade to overcome his situation, but it's not perfect execution, and I get why Tora is then down in the mire for most people. Though, depending on your perspective, I don't think there are any characters in this game that are executed perfectly. Even my favorites aren't immune from this. Mithra doesn't get rolling until Chapter 7 in the DLC. Zeke's comedy can be off-putting, and his insightful conversations with the Praetor are all done in the game's final sprint, so you may not register them. Adam? Okay, Adam might be perfect. If there is one place you do not want to bungle the execution, it's the first impression. It's gonna be really hard to overcome that mental barrier a player puts up. It is going to be hard to convince a player of a character's depth if the player has already lost interest in that character. You also maybe don't want to put the big part of their story in a place that feels completely optional where the gang is just waiting for a boat. There is good stuff in there though past the tiger skin exterior, and I will stand by Tora being an actually good character. You know, I think we can move him up to 9th.